Thank you, Madam President. Like the senator before me, I'd like to take time out to recognize the hardworking mothers in our nation, all across our nation, and hope that they enjoyed their day. I don't have empirical data, but I am almost certain that most moms still found themselves in the kitchen on Mother's Day because perhaps if they didn't cook, no one would eat. But nonetheless, we must cherish our mothers, and we need to cherish them and to really show love, not just on Mother's Day, but every day, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to extend condolences to all the persons who have passed, particularly our meritorious council member, Ronnie Bristol, who last evening we paid tribute to at our headquarters. And I have to tell you, some of the finest talents were on display, just paying tribute to him and paying homage to him as a member of the Musicians Union and just as a great nationalist, committed Bahamian and good human being. And so we would have had so many persons. I don't want to call names to get in trouble, but our own Heather Hunt, Nehemiah Hill, Sweet Emily, the singing Bishop Prophet showed up, and there were just so many persons, Gino D and others, and we really gave him what he was due, or what he is due, in terms of a salute, a musical salute to a gentleman who was so talented and so gifted and served our party and our country with distinction. And so I'd like to extend sympathy to his family and hope that his memory and his commitment to our country goes on, even beyond his passing. And so sympathy to him and to his family at this time.
Yes.
Madam President, I rise to speak on the resolution that is before the Senate today to establish, Madam President, a committee of 3 members of the Senate to monitor the protection and enforcement of human rights in the Bahamas. Madam President, every person born in this world on any of the 7 continents, that's whether they're in Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Europe, or Australia, has human rights that should be protected by the law. And according to the United Nations, Madam President, in their Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there are 30 basic human rights. The Bahamas, Madam President, like many other nations, recognizes the importance of upholding and protecting human rights for all of its citizens and residents. And as we here today make tangible efforts to protect human rights in our country and to adhere to the United Nations list of identified human rights, we need to place special emphasis on persons with disabilities, women, children, young men, persons who are institutionalized, victims of police brutality, and immigrants. Madam President, there are some of the most vulnerable persons that immediately come to mind who are violated, and I look forward to them benefiting from the establishment of this committee. As noted, the United Nations has outlined a comprehensive set of human rights that should be respected and safeguarded. Persons with disabilities have the right to equality, non-discrimination, and full participation in our society, Madam President. And it's essential for us to ensure accessibility, reasonable accommodations, and inclusive opportunities for their well-being and participation in all aspects of Bahamian life. Empowering persons with disabilities in the Bahamas requires a comprehensive approach that encompasses legislative measures, accessibility improvements, awareness campaigns, and inclusive policies. Madam President, I am hoping that this parliamentary committee will work with the government and relevant stakeholders to ensure that all public buildings, transportation system, educational institutions, healthcare facilities, and digital platforms are accessible to everyone, including and especially persons with disabilities. Starting with our Parliament and Senate, Madam President, which hopefully we will see the construction of a new building soon, because while of course they can watch it live, they're not able to as easily come and access live debate in these places. And so We may need to include more ramps around town. Elevators may need to be installed. We need to make sure that washrooms are accessible. Yes. Now we have tactile signage. And now we provide assistive technologies, Madam President, because we have to make sure that persons with disabilities have access to basic human rights when it comes to education and freedom of movement, empowerment, et cetera. So we need to work collectively to make education more inclusive in our country. Madam President, every child, regardless of their ability, has the right to quality education. And therefore, all of our schools should have the necessary resources, specialized support, and trained teachers to cater to the diverse needs of students with various disabilities. Whether that's physical, mental, emotional, but they deserve to have quality education as well, Madam President. Because persons with disabilities are humans, and they're humans with rights, and rights to employment and economic empowerment as well, just like everyone else, Madam President. So we must encourage employers to adopt inclusive hiring practices, providing equal employment opportunities to persons with disabilities. And Madam President, I give credit where it's due. And so at this time, I would like to commend Minister Glover Roll for her role in trying to champion the inclusion of persons with disabilities in terms of employment opportunities. But we must do more, Madam President. Whether that means that we have to incentivize employers, whether we have to ensure that we have vocational training programs that are tailored to the specific needs of abilities of persons with disabilities. Perhaps we need greater entrepreneurship support and access to financial resources. Whatever it takes, Madam President, we have to do it. And we have to work via the committee to enhance participation of persons with disabilities in the workforce. Madam President, empowering persons with disabilities requires collaboration among government agencies, non-governmental organizations. We have to include our disability rights advocates and other community stakeholders. And so by working together and sharing resources, coordinating efforts, it is possible for us to create a more inclusive Bahamian society that values and respects the rights of persons with disabilities. Madam President, people may get tired hearing about it, but I will never get tired speaking about and working towards the protection and promotion of women's rights. This includes the elimination of gender-based discrimination, violence, and stereotypes. Equal opportunities in education, employment, and decision-making processes are vital to achieving gender equality and empowering the women in our Bahamian society. Madam President, I am looking to this good Attorney General to keep his word on advancing legislation for marital rape, citizenship, and gender-based violence via the newly named Protection Against Violence Bill, which he says will be tabled soon. Madam President, you know, yes. I digress, just a moment, Madam President, because, you know, I suggest that our good Senator Pickstock here asks the good member from Golden Isles, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, what his approach would be if he was in charge regarding capital punishment. You can reference today's paper. You see, Madam President, in my opinion, once someone is found guilty and sentenced, then their human rights, the human rights of the person who is found guilty and sentenced, should not overshadow the human rights of their victims. Madam President, children...
Madam President, I stand on a point of clarification. I did not suggest in any way that the human rights of a perpetrator should overshadow the human rights of a victim. Madam President, we were strictly talking about human rights. One, and Madam President, I am not a judge, and we're not before a court. And so I would ask the member to withdraw that statement, which implies something untoward what I said. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Madam President, let me clear up what I just said, because obviously the conscience is a difficult thing to live with. What I said, Madam President, was that I said that the good member perhaps would like to ask his colleague on a particular point, I put a full stop in
Madam
there.
President, she can ask
let
him
me
for
read the
herself.
sentence. Let me read the sentence. And then I said, Madam President, that in my opinion, once someone is found guilty and sentenced, then their human rights should not overshadow those of their victims. I made absolutely no reference in that sentence to the good Senator Pickstock. But clearly, his conscience is at battle right now with him, and so he's sitting there and he's assuming statements that I make that I don't even implicate him in, and he just, I guess, you need to confess, I guess. Perhaps you're feeling a bit bad about what you said earlier, but I certainly didn't imply anything. Madam President, children, as the most vulnerable members of our society, deserve special attention and protection. And Madam President, I would like at this time to commend Rise Bahamas on its consistency in advocating for children over the years. Rise Bahamas comes to mind as one of the foremost civil society groups playing a vital role in raising awareness, lobbying for effective policies, and providing support to children and their families.
Member for the Senator for yielding, Madam President. I move that the Senate do sit beyond 1 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Senate sits beyond 1 p.m. As many are in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The motion is carried. The Senate will sit beyond the 1 p.m. hour.
Thank you, Madam President. The rights of children encompass education, health care, protection from violence, exploitation, and abuse. The Bahamas must prioritize the well-being of its children, ensuring their safety and providing them with the necessary resources for their physical, emotional, and mental development. Madam President, it is quite okay to protect our sea turtles, grouper, and even our conch needs some protection. But we need to be more intentional about enhancing the protection of our children. Regrettably, incidents of abuse and mistreatment not only occur in individual homes, Madam President, but also within certain institutions in our country. The abuse of children at various group homes throughout this archipelago and the mistreatment of the elderly at facilities are deeply concerning. It is imperative that all such incidents are thoroughly investigated and measures are implemented to ensure the safety, dignity, and well-being of those in institutional care. Madam President, I am hopeful that this new committee will recommend the strengthening of our legislative framework so that the Bahamas has comprehensive laws and regulations that address all child protection issues, whether that's child abuse, exploitation, trafficking, child labor, or other issues, and that those laws that exist are strengthened and improved so that they could be effectively enforced and perpetrators face appropriate legal consequences. We must continue to work to strengthen child protection and welfare services and make them accessible, responsive, and equipped to handle reports of abuse, neglect, and any other form of harm. Madam President, we need well-trained professionals to conduct investigations, provide counseling, and ensure the best interests of the child are prioritized. And so I'm happy that this committee will hold public hearings and consult with all sundry as necessary. Madam President, improving the quality of life for children means strengthening families, which is critical for the protection of children. So the committee will hopefully determine that programs and services for parents and caregivers to build skills and capacity, perhaps get mental health support and have access to resources, need to be introduced or strengthened. Family support services can help address some of the underlying issues that contribute to child vulnerability and reduce the risk of abuse or neglect. And Madam President, all of this better positions our country in terms of human rights. Rights to rehabilitation and support services for those who experience abuse or trauma, counseling, therapy, and other necessary interventions to help children recover and heal. Madam President, recovery and healing is possible. I know a friend of mine from grad school worked in California for many years at a facility that specifically catered to children who experienced any form of trauma, whether that's witnessing violent crimes, whether they may have been raped or abused, you know, whether they may have lost both parents. And this facility specifically dealt with helping those children become whole again. And this is the kind of approach we need to take and strengthen here, Madam President. Madam President, recently I had the opportunity to speak with and watch a mother grieve the loss of her young son, who was recently killed. And together we reflected on the fears of mothers when sons go out at night to have a good time. And Madam President, let's be clear, going out is nothing new. Our forefathers went out and they stayed out late too. They went to the Cat and Fiddle, the Silver Slipper, and they had a good time, and they stayed out late. The difference is that as mothers of sons, we not only have to be concerned, Madam President, about the increase in violent crimes, but also police brutality and profiling. These are very real issues, Madam President, human rights issues when it comes to being a young male, especially of a certain hue in our country, based on things that I've heard. So many mothers stay up late, and they tell me they pray for their sons to get back home safely. You know, the irony of life is that for many years, my adult son drove a Honda Accord Sport. And I begged him, I said, listen, man, why don't you not drive it? And he said, Mommy, just because, you know, I live in a country or whatever, I'm working, I'm educated, why can't I drive the car of my preference? I said, yes, but once you're in a Honda Accord, you're going to get stopped, you're going to get pulled over. So for years, he got stopped, he got pulled over. Finally, Madam President, he heeded his mom's words, and he gave up the Honda Accord and got a little Japanese vehicle. But now, they say every time I turn on the radio, they say the person in escaped in a Japanese vehicle. So now he might as well have kept the Honda Accord, because now in the Japanese vehicle as a young black male, he's likely to be stopped, because usually those are the ones you hear leaving the scene of a crime. So the reality is it's just difficult for young men to operate in our society because there are challenges that exist. They are sometimes profiled. And so we have to remember, though, Madam President, that not all of them are lost. So we can't stereotype or paint them all, if they're in a certain age category or a certain hue, we can't paint them all with the same paintbrush, Madam President. Young men, too, require support and guidance to thrive. Their rights to education, employment, and participation in decision-making processes should be upheld. Empowering young men with opportunities and resources can contribute to their personal growth and the overall development of the nation. And I have to say that I'm happy to be serving here in this Senate with so many young senators, young males, Madam President, because our young men are full of potential and they are doing well. And so we ought to recognize that and embrace them and include them in our governance and other processes in our country. But Madam President, young men, they need protection. And God forbid they become targets of criminals or even of police. A part of human rights in my mind is ensuring greater transparency in investigating police-involved shootings to help maintain public trust, accountability, and promote justice. Madam President, I recall so many families over the years fighting and speaking out. I recall one mother for years making posters, holding press conferences and picketing, Madam President, until these families become void of energy, because it simply is not sustainable to fight the system. And I'm not saying that in every case the police may be right or wrong, but the reality is that police-involved shootings should perhaps be investigated by an independent body or agency to minimize conflicts of interest and promote impartiality in the investigation process. There needs to be clear protocols that outline the steps to be followed, the collection of evidence, witness interviews, and the use of forensic analysis. There needs to be timely and accurate release of information to the public about the incident, Madam President. While certain information might need to be withheld to protect the integrity of the investigation, efforts should be made to release relevant details. We have body cams, but I know I haven't seen any of the footage, Madam President, unlike some other countries where footage is released and you can see it on the news. So we should really consider the establishment of independent review panels comprised of community members, legal experts, and representatives from civil rights organizations to oversee the investigation process, to review the evidence, and provide recommendations for accountability and policy changes. Madam President, I'm hoping that the committee will recommend that victims and witnesses are provided with appropriate support and protection through the whole investigation process, and whether that includes legal representation or counseling, but just safeguard them against intimidation or retaliation. Because in my mind, it cannot be that the police are involved in the shooting. They're the ones who collect the evidence, investigate the incidents, and present the defense. Because the reality is that if an investigation reveals misconduct or wrongdoing by police officers, there must be a clear and transparent process for holding them accountable. And disciplinary measures should be proportionate to the misconduct identified. And Madam President, while a lot of things exist in the law, and we know that if we look at law books, there are countless volumes of them, but we have to make sure that these laws are enforced and carried out, and that people know that there's transparency, there's accountability, and that they have some recourse. We have to do more to help champion that and to make sure that victims and their families know what their rights are. So whether that's an educational campaign or whatever it is, Madam President, because not every family can afford sometimes to engage, perhaps, whether it's outside counsel, whatever it is, they can't all afford it. Madam President, my colleague spoke to the challenges that exist in Haiti, and while Haitians do represent the greatest proportion of our influx of illegal migrants, we have challenges too with persons from other jurisdictions. But Madam President, regardless of where people come from, it is paramount that we treat immigrants humanely, including those held in detention. And all individuals, regardless of their immigration status, have fundamental human rights that should be respected. And so it is essential that we address any instances of mistreatment or neglect, ensuring that immigrants are treated with dignity and given fair and just treatment under our laws. So we should, of course, in my mind, repatriate as soon as possible. But if they are detained for extensive periods, then we need to consider the learning loss for the immigrant children as well, and make sure that the women and men are protected from abuses of all kinds. Because, of course, we would want those same courtesies extended to us if we find ourselves somewhere else. And Madam President, I have to say to Bahamian citizens that, but by the grace of God, we take for granted our current status, but as we continue to talk about climate change, we hope that we never find ourselves becoming environmental refugees in any way. And so we would want even now to do unto others as we would have others do unto us. Yes, you ought to learn it. Madam President, I am happy that we are taking this step towards upholding and promoting human rights for our citizens, residents, and transients. It is often regrettable that we have to be nudged by international agencies on such critical issues, but I am happy that we are here nonetheless. I look forward with great anticipation to this parliamentary committee and its success, inclusive of 3 members of the Senate, in addressing human rights issues of all kinds, including those that impact persons with disabilities, women, children, young men, and institutionalized persons, those involving police brutality, the children, the elderly, Madam President, and the humane treatment of immigrants. All of this will help our nation move closer to creating an inclusive and just society where every person is treated with dignity, respect, and equality under the law. I support this resolution, Madam President.